The great hall of the alien empire was silent. Crystal walls glowed with strange blue light, and golden banners of the royal family moved softly in the air. Hundreds of nobles stood around the throne, their alien eyes watching in disbelief. At the center of the hall stood a human, an ordinary man wearing nothing but simple clothes. He looked small compared to the tall and shining aliens, yet he stood straight, calm, and silent. The queen leaned forward on her throne, her voice sharp and cold. "That human?" she asked, her words echoing across the chamber. Whispers spread through the court like fire. Nobles looked at each other. Some laughed, some frowned, some stepped back as if the sight of the human was dangerous. The princess stood beside her mother, her face calm but her eyes burning with strange light. "Yes," the princess replied, "he's the one I want." The room erupted in noise. Alien lords shouted, their voices full of anger. "A human? Impossible," one cried. "He is weak, fragile, nothing compared to us," another said. Some nobles covered their mouths, shocked that the princess would choose a creature so low. Others shook their heads, calling it madness, but the princess did not move. Her gaze stayed on the human. The queen turned her sharp eyes to her daughter. "Why him?" she asked, her voice heavy. The princess spoke slowly. "Because I saw what he did, and I know what he is." Her words made the court silent again. Everyone waited for her to explain, but she did not. She only smiled, as if the truth was too great to tell at once. The human said nothing. He did not bow, he did not tremble, he did not even look afraid. He only stood, with quiet eyes that carried a strange strength. This silence made the nobles uneasy. One of them hissed, "Why does he not speak? Is he stupid?" Another whispered, "No, he is waiting like a predator before the strike." Fear began to mix with their anger. The queen leaned back, studying the man. "You stand in the court of the most powerful empire in this galaxy," she said. "Do you understand where you are?" The human lifted his head and nodded once. Nothing more. No words, just a single nod. The queen narrowed her eyes. "You are not afraid?" she asked. The man looked at her, calm as stone, and stayed silent. The nobles gasped, angered at his boldness but also disturbed. For in his silence there was no weakness, only quiet defiance. The princess smiled, her heart certain. She remembered what she had seen, a battlefield burning under the twin suns, alien war machines crushing soldiers, and then this human, standing alone, refusing to run. He fought with broken weapons, fought with his bare hands, fought until the machines fell. She remembered the fire in his eyes, the way he rose again and again, even when blood covered his body. She had never seen such spirit. Not in her people, not in any empire. That was the moment she knew. This human was different. He was more than he appeared. But in the court, the nobles only saw a fragile creature of flesh. One noble stepped forward, his golden armor shining. "Your Majesty, this is an insult," he shouted. "How can a human stand in this holy place? He is not worthy." Others agreed, their voices loud and hateful. The queen raised her hand, and silence returned. Her eyes never left the human. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "we should test him." A ripple of fear ran through the court. "Test him? What kind of test?" The princess stepped closer, her voice firm. "No, mother, you do not need a test. You only need to believe what I saw." But the queen shook her head. "Our empire does not follow visions or dreams. We follow strength." She looked at the man again, her eyes sharp like blades. "If he truly is special, then he will prove it." The man still did not speak. He only breathed slowly, like someone who had seen such moments before, like someone who was used to being judged, doubted, underestimated. The princess felt her chest tighten. She wanted to defend him, to shout that he had already proved himself. But she knew it was useless. The court would never believe without seeing. So she waited, certain that when the time came, the truth would burn before their eyes. The queen leaned forward once more. "That human?" she repeated, her voice softer now, almost thoughtful. The princess met her gaze without fear. Yes, she said, louder than before, her voice echoing across the golden hall. He is the one I want. The hall went silent again. The nobles froze, their anger turning into confusion. Some whispered, "Why does she want him? What is her plan?" Others whispered of old prophecies, stories of outsiders who would one day change the empire. The queen tapped her fingers against her throne, lost in thought. Her eyes narrowed, but her lips curved into the faintest smile. She had seen many warriors, many kings, many heroes. But this human was different. His silence carried weight. His presence disturbed even the strongest nobles, and her daughter's certainty was unshaken. The queen sat back, her eyes never leaving him. Very slowly, she whispered again, "That human?" And in the silence of the court, with all eyes burning on the small figure, the princess gave the final word. "Yes," she said, her voice ringing like a blade drawn in the dark. "Yes, he's the one I want." The chamber shook with whispers, once more, but deep in the hearts of all who stood there a seed of fear had been planted. Because if a human could make a princess defy her queen, and make a court of thousands fall into silence, then perhaps this human was not weak at all. Perhaps this human was something far greater. The hall exploded with voices. Nobles shouted at the same time, their words crashing into one another, like thunder. Some demanded the human be thrown out, others demanded his execution, and a few simply laughed at the princess's strange choice. The golden walls trembled with their anger, and even the torches that burned with blue flame seemed to flicker with unrest. One elder noble pointed his long silver staff toward the princess. "This is madness," he cried. "No royal should lower themselves to a creature of flesh and weakness." Another shouted, "He has no crown, no armor, no power. He is nothing." The voices grew louder, filling the chamber with storm-like noise. The queen raised her hand, but even her presence could not silence them at once. The court was drowning in rage and confusion. The princess did not flinch. She stood straight beside her mother's throne, her eyes locked on the human. He remained quiet, unshaken by the storm around him. His silence was louder than their shouting, and it made the nobles uneasy. They insulted him, but he did not answer. They mocked him, but he did not lower his head. The more they tried to break him, the more his calmness unsettled them. Finally, the queen struck the air with her hand, and a sound like a great bell rang across the hall. The chamber fell quiet. Her eyes burned with fire as she looked at her daughter. "Explain yourself," she commanded. "Tell this court why you stand for him." The princess took a step forward. Her voice was calm, but every word cut through the silence. "Because he is not like others," she said. "Because when I saw him, I saw strength no one here understands." The nobles hissed and muttered, their eyes flashing with anger. One of them shouted, "Strength? From a human? Lies." Another cried, "She is bewitched. She is blind." The queen tilted her head, studying her daughter. "And what did you see?" she asked, her voice like steel. The princess closed her eyes for a moment, remembering. She saw fire, smoke, and the ruins of a battlefield. Alien machines towering above, crushing everything in their path. And in the middle of that horror stood the human, alone but unbroken. She saw him raise a broken pipe like a sword. She saw him strike again and again, refusing to fall. She saw him stand when no soldier dared to move. She opened her eyes and her voice grew stronger. "I saw him fight when all others fled," she said. "I saw him win when there was no hope." The court was silent for a heartbeat. Then laughter broke the stillness, sharp and cruel. A tall noble with black armor stepped forward, his eyes glowing with pride. "This is the proof you bring," he sneered, "that he swung a pipe like a child in the dust?" The nobles laughed with him, their voices filling the chamber with scorn. But not all laughed. Some shifted uncomfortably. They had heard rumors too, whispers of a human who turned the tide of battle, stories carried by broken soldiers, stories they had dismissed as fantasy. Now those whispers returned to their minds, stronger than before. The queen's face remained unreadable. Her fingers tapped the arm of her throne, slow and steady. At last she spoke, her voice calm but heavy. "Rumors are smoke, and smoke can lie," she said. "If he is what you claim, then let him prove it before us." The princess stepped forward quickly. "No, mother, you do not need to test him." But the queen raised her hand, silencing her. "Our empire does not move by faith or feeling," she said. "We move by strength and truth." The nobles cheered at her words. "Yes, test him," they cried. "Show his weakness. Let all. See, he is nothing." Others shouted, "Let him face the arena. Let him fall before our beasts." The hall shook with excitement. The princess's heart tightened, but she stood tall. She looked at the human, and to her surprise, he still did not show fear. His eyes met hers for the first time, and though he said nothing, she understood he was ready. The queen's voice rose above the chaos. "Bring him to the trial," she declared. The guards, tall as mountains and clad in shining silver armor, moved forward. Their spears glowed with blue fire as they surrounded the human. The nobles cheered and laughed, their anger now turning into cruel joy. At last they would see this fragile creature broken. At last they would watch the princess's strange dream shatter. But even as the guards stood around him, the human did not move. He did not plead. He did not resist. He only walked forward with them. The nobles fell silent for a moment. Something about his calmness, his quiet acceptance, disturbed them again. It was not the way of prey. It was the way of a hunter who had walked into danger before. The princess watched him leave the hall, her heart burning with both fear and pride. She whispered to herself, "They will see, they will all see." The queen's eyes followed the man as he left, her face unreadable, yet her mind turning with questions. She had seen warriors tremble before their trial. She had seen kings break under the weight of the court. But this man did not break. This man did not tremble. Her lips curved into the smallest of smiles. Perhaps her daughter was not as foolish as the court believed, and as the doors of the great hall closed, the nobles continued to whisper, some with laughter, some with doubt, and some with fear. The princess stood alone among them, but she felt no weakness. She had chosen, and she would not step back. And the human, walking silently toward the unknown, carried the weight of their doubt on his shoulders, but his steps were steady, for he knew, as he had always known, that strength is not always in size, and that fear does not belong to those who refuse to bow. The arena of the empire was vast and dark. Stone walls rose high, covered with banners of past victories. Torches of blue fire burned in long lines, their light flickering across the sand. The nobles filled the balconies above, their voices mixing into a storm of expectation. They had come not to watch a contest, but to watch a human fall. The gates opened and the man was led inside. He walked slowly, yet his steps were steady. The guards kept close, their weapons glowing as if afraid this fragile creature might somehow turn dangerous. But the human never fought against them. He did not shout. He did not speak. He simply walked. When he reached the center, the guards stepped back, and still he stood in silence. Above, the queen sat on her high seat, her crown shining under the twin suns. Her eyes never left the man. The princess stood near her, her hands tight against the railing. Her heart beat fast, not from fear of his weakness, but from fear of what the court would do to him. The nobles laughed, their voices sharp. "Look at him," one sneered. "He doesn't even carry a weapon." "He is finished already," another replied. The voices rose in cruel joy, but the man did not look at them. His gaze stayed forward, fixed on the closed gate at the far end of the arena. The queen raised her hand, and the arena fell quiet. Her voice rang out clear. "You stand in the heart of our empire, human," she said. "Here we test warriors. Here we find the truth of strength." Her words echoed against the stone. "You have been chosen by my daughter, but choice means nothing without proof." She leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "If you are what she believes, show us." The nobles cheered, their voices shaking the walls. The princess's chest grew tight, but the man remained still. He gave no answer, no promise, no boast. His silence was heavier than words. It spread across the arena, unsettling those who watched. Some nobles frowned, whispering, "Why does he not speak? Is he empty, or is he hiding something?" Then the great gate began to open. The sound was like thunder as chains pulled and iron scraped. Darkness poured out first, then the heavy steps of a beast. The ground shook with each step, and the crowd cheered louder. The creature emerged, a monster bred for combat, its body covered with black armor, its eyes glowing red, its teeth long as blades. The nobles cried in delight. "Let the human fall," they shouted. "Let him be broken." The princess gripped the railing harder. Her eyes never left the man. Would he run? Would he beg? No, he did not move. He only watched the beast as it stepped closer. When the creature roared, shaking the air, the man blinked once but showed no fear. The nobles grew louder. They mocked him. "Look at him, frozen like prey. He doesn't even raise his hands, but still." He did not move. He stood as if waiting, as if measuring. The princess understood. He was studying, watching every detail. She whispered, "Not frozen, waiting." The beast charged, its claws tearing the sand. The nobles roared with excitement. The man did not step back. At the last moment he moved, quick, sharp, faster than the nobles expected. The creature's claws struck the ground, missing him by inches. Gasps filled the air. The man rolled across the sand and came to his feet. Still silent, still calm. The princess's heart leapt. He was not broken. He was ready. The nobles shouted in anger now. "Lucky move," one spat. "He will not escape again," another growled. But the queen leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. This was not luck, she thought. This was control. The beast turned again, roaring with rage. It charged once more, faster this time. The human waited until the last instant, then slipped aside. Sand flew, claws struck empty air again. The crowd fell silent for a moment. The princess smiled. He was not prey. He was the storm hidden in silence. The queen watched with growing interest. She had seen warriors scream and roar in battle, but never one so quiet. Never one who fought without a word. His silence was not weakness. It was focus. And in that, focus was danger. The nobles began to whisper now. What is he? Why does he not fear? The princess's voice rose in her heart. He is human, she thought. That is why the beast attacked again and again, but each time the man avoided, his body moving with strange rhythm. He had no weapon. Yet his hands moved like he had held one all his life. Every motion was sharp, every step chosen. The noble's laughter began to fade, replaced by unease. This was no accident. This was skill. Still, the man did not strike. He only waited, dodged, studied. His silence became heavier with each moment. It pressed on the nobles like an invisible weight. The queen leaned back slowly, her lips curving into the faintest smile. She understood now. This man was not silent because he was weak. He was silent because he had no need for words. The beast roared once more, blood-red eyes burning with fury. The man lowered his head slightly, breathing slow, and for the first time, he moved toward the beast instead of away. The crowd gasped, the princess's heart thundered, and in that moment, every noble realized, the silence of the human was not empty. It was the silence before a storm. The princess closed her eyes as the arena echoed with the beast's roar, but in her mind, she was no longer in the royal court. She was back on the battlefield the day she first saw the human. It was a place of fire and smoke, a land broken by war. The sky was red with burning ships, and the ground was black with ash her people had been losing that day. The machines of the enemy walked like giants, tall and merciless. Their metal legs crushed soldiers, their cannons turned warriors into dust. Every shout of courage ended in silence. Every shield was broken. Every wall destroyed. Even the strongest of her guards had fallen back. Fear spread like poison, and hope was gone. The princess had stood among the fleeing soldiers. Her heart filled with shame. She was royalty, but her power meant nothing in that moment. She could not fight the machines, she could not stop the destruction. All she could do was watch as her people were crushed. She thought the day was lost until she saw him. He was just a human, no armor, no shining weapons, no title. He carried only a pipe torn from broken metal. Blood ran down his face. His clothes were torn, his body was tired. But his eyes burned like fire. And though everyone ran, he walked forward, straight into the path of the machines. The princess remembered the sound. The metal giant roared. Its cannon aimed at him, and still he did not stop. He swung the broken pipe with both hands. It struck the machine's leg. A sound like thunder filled the air. The giant stumbled for a moment, and the soldiers gasped. The human struck again and again, his arms shaking with pain. But he did not fall. He shouted once, a wordless cry of rage and defiance, and in that cry was more courage than she had ever heard. The machine raised its cannon, ready to crush him. But he rolled under it, climbed up its side with his bare hands. The princess could hardly believe what she was seeing. No alien warrior had dared such madness, but the human did. He climbed higher, his hands bleeding against sharp steel. At last he reached the top, and with one final cry, he drove the broken pipe deep into its glowing eye. The machine screamed, sparks flying like stars. Then it fell, crashing to the ground, shaking the battlefield. Silence followed. For a moment, even the enemy stopped. All eyes turned to the human standing on the fallen giant. His chest rose and fell with heavy breath. His arms hung weak, but his spirit did not. He stood like a king on a broken throne, and in that moment hope returned. The soldiers who had run now stopped. They saw him, one fragile human, bringing down a beast of war, and something inside them lit again. They picked up their weapons, their voices rose, they charged once more, not because of orders, but because of him. The human had reminded them that even the smallest spark could burn the dark. The princess remembered her own breath, how it caught in her chest, how her heart beat with both fear and awe. She whispered then, though no one heard. He is different. The battle raged on. The machines fought back, but the soldiers no longer fled. Every time the human moved, they followed. Every time he struck, they found their courage. The battlefield turned, the tide shifted. Not because of numbers, not because of power, but because one man refused to fall. The princess remembered watching him fight for hours. His body grew weaker, but his will grew stronger. Even when wounded, he rose. Even when blood dripped from his hands, he lifted the pipe again. He fought with nothing but heart, and the machines, one by one, began to fall. By the end of the day, the battlefield was fire and ruin, but the soldiers stood, alive. And at the center, covered in ash and blood, stood the human. He looked like a man broken, yet he still stood straight. His eyes looked at the horizon, not at the ground. He did not see himself as small. He saw himself as equal to any giant. The princess had stepped toward him then, her guards calling out, in fear, but she ignored them. She wanted to see him closer, to see the face of the man who had turned defeat into hope. When she stood before him, he looked at her once. His eyes were calm, filled with fire, yet not arrogance. And then he walked past her. He did not bow. He did not ask for thanks. He simply walked, as if he needed no crown, no praise, as if surviving was enough. The princess's heart had chosen in that moment, not with reason, not with logic, but with truth. She knew he was not just a man. He was something more. Something her people could never understand until they saw. Back in the arena, the princess opened her eyes. The beast roared again. The nobles cheered. The queen watched with calm fire. But the princess's heart whispered the same words again. He is different. And her certainty only grew stronger. She looked at the human standing below, silent and steady, and she smiled because she knew the court was about to see what she had seen. And when they saw, they would never forget. The queen's voice carried across the arena, calm yet heavy. "Enough whispers, enough rumors, let us see the truth," she said. Her eyes shone like cold fire as she looked down at the human. "You stand in my empire, in my court, in my arena," she declared. "And yet you stand as if nothing here can move you." The nobles shouted in agreement, their voices eager. "Test him," one cried. "Prove he is weak," another yelled. The sound of their laughter and anger filled the high walls. But the queen did not smile, she did not laugh. Her face was sharp, her thoughts hidden. Only her daughter saw the faint spark in her eyes. The princess stepped forward, her voice cutting against the noise. "Mother, you do not need this," she said. Her words were strong, but her heart raced. "You saw how he stands. You felt his silence. He does not need to prove himself again." The queen turned slowly toward her daughter, her crown catching the blue flames. "Your heart may believe, but hearts can lie," she answered. "The court does not follow belief. It follows proof." The princess clenched her hands. "Then you risk everything," she whispered. But the queen raised her hand, silencing her. Her eyes returned to the human. "If you are truly more than what they see," she said, "then you will show it. Before us all." The arena fell into silence. Every noble leaned forward, waiting. The guards lowered their weapons, unsure if they would need to act. The princess's breath caught in her throat, and the human, standing in the center of the sand, finally moved. Not with words, not with anger. He simply lifted his head, looked at the queen, and nodded once. No fear, no hesitation, just quiet acceptance. The nobles muttered at his silence. Why does he not speak? Why does he not swear loyalty? Does he think he is greater than us? But their voices carried unease, for the human's nod had carried more weight than 1,000 words. The queen leaned back on her throne, her eyes never leaving him. "So be it," she said, her voice echoing. "Let the trial begin." The crowd roared with excitement. Some cheered for blood, some for humiliation, all for spectacle. The princess gripped the railing, her heart beating faster. She wanted to cry out to stop this, but she knew her mother. The queen had already decided. Only truth would end this test. Only proof would silence the court. The queen raised her hand again. "This trial will not be simple," she declared. "If you are what my daughter claims, then you will endure not one but 3 challenges." Gasps spread across the balconies. 3 trials, each more deadly than the last. Even the greatest alien warriors struggled to survive them. And this human, this small and fragile creature, was to face them alone. The princess's chest tightened. She wanted to protest again, but the human's calm face stopped her. He was not shaken, not even surprised. It was as if he had known this was coming all along. The queen continued, her voice sharp. "The first trial will test your body," she said. "Strength against beast. The second will test your mind, a puzzle of danger and choice. The third will test your spirit, the weight of fear and pain that no crown can carry." She leaned forward, her voice softer now, but heavier. "Survive them, and perhaps we will believe." The crowd cheered louder. The nobles laughed, already dreaming of the human's fall. They could not imagine him passing even the first test. But the queen's eyes did not carry mockery. There was something else hidden there, a curiosity. She did not show before. The human listened in silence. He did not bow. He did not kneel. He stood like a mountain, steady and still. The princess whispered under her breath, "They do not know you, but they will." The queen raised her hand once more. "Bring the beast," she commanded. The ground trembled as the heavy gates began to open again. Chains clattered, gears turned, and darkness poured into the arena. The nobles leaned forward with hungry eyes. The princess closed hers for a moment, praying silently, and the human did not move. He only waited, as he always did, his silence stronger than the roars of the crowd. The first beast stepped into the light. It was larger than the last, its body covered in jagged steel plates. Its eyes burned with red fire, and smoke hissed from its mouth. The crowd gasped in, delight. "Perfect," one noble laughed. "This will end quickly." The creature roared, shaking the walls, but the man only watched, his breathing slow, his eyes sharp. The princess gripped the railing tighter, her heart burning with both fear and pride. The queen's lips curved slightly, not into a smile, but into something close. She leaned back and whispered to herself, "Show me, human, show me what you are." The arena shook as the beast lowered its head and charged. The crowd rose to their feet, voices screaming in delight. The princess held her breath, her eyes locked on the man, and in that storm of noise the human did something no one expected. He closed his eyes just for a moment, as if listening not to the beast, but to something deeper inside. Then, at the last instant, he stepped aside, and the beast thundered past him, crashing into the sand. The nobles gasped, their laughter cut short. The princess's lips curved into a small smile, and the queen's eyes narrowed, the spark inside her growing brighter. The trial had only begun. But already the court knew this would not be simple. The human had accepted the queen's challenge, and his silence had turned into a storm. The beast roared, its voice shaking the arena like thunder. Dust rose from the sand, and the nobles cheered. But in the center of the storm, the human stood calm. His breathing was steady, his eyes fixed. On the monster before him, he had no weapon, no shield, only his hands and his will. The creature lunged, its claws tearing through the ground. The human moved at the last instant, sharp and quick. The crowd gasped as the beast struck empty air. The man slid beneath its heavy body, rolling across the sand. When he rose, his hands were bloodied, but his eyes remained calm. The nobles shouted with anger. "Lucky," one cried. "He cannot do it again," another sneered. But already the beast had turned, smoke pouring from its jaws. It roared and charged again, faster this time. The princess gripped the railing, her heart racing. But once more the human moved. He ducked, twisted, and leapt aside. The beast crashed into the wall, stone breaking, sparks flying. For a moment the crowd fell silent. They could not understand. The human did not fight like their warriors. He did not meet power with power. He moved with speed, with patience, with strange rhythm. The queen narrowed her eyes. This was not chance. This was skill. The beast turned again, rage burning in its red eyes. It leapt into the air, claws reaching. The man ran forward instead of back. He slid beneath it, grabbed the broken chain dragging from its armor, and with one sudden pull he twisted the beast's neck. The creature slammed into the sand with a roar of pain. The man climbed onto its back, holding tight. His fists struck again and again. The crowd gasped, and with one final strike, the beast fell silent. The arena shook with cries. Some nobles shouted in anger, others in awe. The princess smiled, her eyes shining, her heart whispered, "They are seeing it now." The queen leaned forward, her lips almost a smile. But she spoke, coldly. "First trial. Passed." The human stood, his chest rising and falling with heavy breath. Blood dripped from his hands, his body weak, but his eyes unbroken. He did not look at the queen. He did not bow. He only stood in silence, waiting for the next challenge. The nobles whispered among themselves, fear mixing with disbelief. This was no ordinary creature of flesh. This was something else, something they could not name. The queen raised her hand again. "Bring the second trial," she commanded. The gates opened once more, but no beast stepped out instead. Machines rolled into the arena. Tall stone pillars rose from the sand, shifting into a maze. The crowd murmured with confusion. This was no test of strength. This was a puzzle of mind. The princess frowned. The maze was filled with traps, with shifting paths. Even warriors of the empire struggled inside. And yet her mother was sending him there. The human looked at the maze and did not hesitate. He stepped forward, his silence heavy, his eyes sharp. The walls closed behind him. The crowd leaned forward, waiting for screams. The princess held her breath, but no sound came. Inside the maze, the human walked slow and steady. Every turn he paused, listening, watching. He touched the walls, felt the ground. He moved not with fear but with strange patience. A blade shot from the wall, sharp as lightning. He bent low, the blade cutting only air. Arrows fired from the ceiling. He rolled aside, the arrows striking stone. The maze groaned, doors opening and closing, but he never rushed. He moved like water, flowing around danger. Every trap missed, every danger failed. The nobles grew restless. "This is trickery," they cried. "No man can pass the maze." But the queen stayed silent, her eyes never leaving the dark corridors. Inside, the man stopped before a dead end. He knelt, pressed his hand against the sand, and then slowly he smiled. He struck the ground once with his fist. The wall trembled, and a hidden path opened. The crowd gasped. He had solved the maze's secret step by step. He moved deeper, until at last, light broke before him. He stepped out into the arena again, his body scratched, his hands bleeding, but his eyes calm, his silence unbroken. The nobles shouted in disbelief. "Impossible!" one cried. "He cheated," another claimed. But their voices trembled, for deep inside, they knew the truth. The queen stood tall, her voice strong. Second trial passed. The princess felt her chest fill with pride. Her eyes met the man's, and though he did not speak, she understood. He was not done yet. He was ready for more. The queen's eyes narrowed. She leaned forward, her crown shining, her voice dropped low, almost a whisper. "Then let us see if your spirit can stand where flesh and mind have survived." The nobles fell silent. The princess's heart froze, for the final trial was about to begin. The arena was silent. The first beast had fallen. The maze had been broken. The human had passed 2 trials that even seasoned warriors feared. Yet he stood still, breathing slow, blood dripping from his hands but his eyes unshaken. The queen rose from her throne, her crown glowing under the twin suns. Her voice rang across the sand. "2 trials complete," she said. "But strength and mind are not enough. Spirit must be tested." The nobles leaned forward, their faces filled with hunger and doubt. "The final trial begins now," the queen declared. The ground trembled, the torches flickered, the air grew heavy. A dark mist spread into the arena, covering the sand like a living shadow. The nobles whispered nervously, for this trial was not flesh, not steel, not puzzle. It was fear. Fear born from the deepest parts of the mind. The human stood in the center, surrounded by mist. Shapes moved inside the darkness, whispering, calling. Voices rose around him, voices only he could hear. "You are nothing," one hissed. "You are weak," another growled. The mist shifted into faces, into monsters, into memories of pain. Every shadow tried to crush his spirit. Every voice tried to break his will. The nobles watched in silence. Some smiled cruelly, waiting for him to fall. Others frowned, disturbed by the growing power of the mist. The princess gripped the railing, her heart burning. She knew this trial. Well, she knew many warriors had lost themselves in this shadow. They screamed, they begged, they surrendered, but the human remained silent. He closed his eyes. The voices pressed harder. "You cannot win," they whispered. "You will die." Here, images of failure, of broken battles, of endless defeat filled the mist. But still he did not bow. He stood with his hands at his sides, his body shaking, but his will unbroken. The princess's heart whispered, "Stand, just stand." And he did. He stood as if rooted to the ground, as if no shadow could move him. Minutes passed like hours, the mist thickened, the crowd shifted uneasily. Why did he not break? Why did he not fall? The queen narrowed her eyes. She had seen warriors scream in this trial, she had seen kings drop to their knees, but this man stood still. She leaned forward, whispering to herself, "What are you, human?" Then the mist rose higher. It shaped into a giant, a creature of shadow and flame. It towered above him, eyes burning red, teeth sharp as knives. The nobles gasped. The princess's breath caught. This was the heart of the trial, the shadow of death itself. The giant roared, its voice shaking the walls. It raised its claw to crush him. The human opened his eyes at last, and for the first time he spoke. One word. No. The sound was calm, but it carried like thunder. The mist trembled. The giant paused. The crowd fell silent. The queen's lips parted, surprised. The princess's eyes filled with tears, because in that one word was all his truth. No to fear, no to surrender, no to chains. The shadow struck. But the human did not move back. He stepped forward, his fist raised, his hand passed through the mist. The giant shattered into dust. The darkness screamed, then broke apart. Light returned to the arena. The mist vanished, leaving only the man standing in the sand. The nobles were silent, their faces pale, their voices gone. They had watched something they could not explain. A human facing the impossible and refusing to fall. The queen stood tall, her face unreadable, but her eyes carried something new. Respect. The princess stepped forward, her voice strong. "Do you see now?" she cried. "Do you see what I saw?" The nobles looked at her, then back at the man. Whispers filled the air. Impossible. Unreal. But deep inside, they knew. They had seen the truth. The queen raised her hand, and silence returned. Her voice carried across the arena. "That human?" she said again, softer this time. Her eyes locked on him. The princess replied, her voice like steel. "Yes, he is the one I want." The queen studied her daughter, then the man. For a long moment, no one spoke. The nobles waited, their hearts racing. At last, the queen's lips curved into a faint smile. "Perhaps humans are not so small after all," she whispered. The princess's heart leapt with pride. The human stood still, his silence returning. But his presence filled the arena, more than any shout. The nobles bowed their heads, some in respect, some in fear. The queen sat back, her decision made, and the trial was complete. The human had faced beast, maze, and shadow. He had endured strength, mind, and spirit, and he had won. Not with weapons, not with power, but with something greater, a will that could not be broken. As the crowd whispered, the human lifted his head, and for the second time, he spoke, his voice calm, steady, unshaken. "You wanted proof," he said. "Now you have it." The chamber fell into silence again. The queen closed her eyes, her smile faint but real. The princess's eyes shone like stars, and the nobles knew this day would be remembered, not as the day a human was broken, but as the day a human broke their pride.